Okay, we'll get started very shortly here. In the meantime, please don't forget you can take this opportunity to sign up for the Great Washington Shakeout. Actually, we know it's a little bit past the hour, so Katrina, if you want to kick us off when you're ready, just let me know. I'll change the slide.
Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. And then, Brian, are you recording the meeting?
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. So glad to have you here for the Shakeout for Workplaces webinar. Thank you for making time in your busy schedules to learn more about our Washington State geohazards and how to prepare and stay safe during them. My name is Kadrina Quakeweb. I am the Functional Recovery Project Manager at Washington State Emergency Management Division. Joining me is Brian Turbush, our Earthquake and Volcano Program Manager, Dante Di Sabatino, our Tsunami Vertical Evacuation Structure Project Manager, and later we'll be having Tristan Allen, the Enhanced 911 Homeland Security Unit Manager for Washington EMD, join us to speak on business continuity. I'm also happy to introduce our ASL interpreter, Catherine Thomas. For those of you listening on the call, I have black hair, I have brown eyes, and I'm wearing a dark polo, blue polo with the Washington State Emergency Management Division logo. We have a lot of information to go over today, so I'm going to move quickly into our housekeeping items before we really start. Next slide. Okay, so yes, this webinar is being recorded. The webinar recording will be uploaded to our YouTube page at youtube.com/user/emdprepare. The slides will be available after the presentation. We will email those out. For live captions, click on the ellipsis at the top of the screen, those three dots, and select language and speech, then click on show live captions. You can pin the ASL interpreter videos so that you are able to see them during the entire presentation. Questions can be submitted in the Q&A tab at the top at our chat, as our chat is closed during this presentation. And as a friendly reminder, the webinar is to help inform and empower. This is not a mandate. This is not a requirement. This is just an optional drill for you to participate in. And we'll go to our next slide. So agenda items for today, this is separated into three parts, part 1, part 2, and part 3. Our first part is we're going to define what is the Great Shakeout for those who are not familiar. Then we're going to go into Washington State earthquakes and tsunamis and their impacts and how to stay safe. Then we're going to go into how to hold a drill at work. And then our part 3 is business continuity planning, resources, and any questions that we can spotlight that happened during our Q&A process. And we can go to our next slide. So what is the Great Washington Shakeout? It is the world's largest earthquake and tsunami drill. It happens every year on the third Thursday of October. This year it's happening on October 16th at 10:16 a.m. It originally started off as a one-off event in California, and since then, millions of people have participated every year worldwide. Washington State has one of the highest registration rates, but as a reminder, please register as well. This is our annual drill to think about and practice what would happen if an earthquake and or tsunami happened in our state. What would I do? How would I prepare? I put the QR code to register for the Great Washington Shakeout, but you can also visit the website at shakeout.org/register. And as a friendly reminder, participating in the Great Washington Shakeout does not need to strictly happen on October 16th. Earthquakes are unpredictable, but earthquake drills don't have to be. So if October 16th is not very convenient for your organization, you can practice that on a different date. Just be sure to register. And with that, I'm going to hand this off to Brian Turbush to talk about Washington earthquakes.
Thank you, Katrina. Again, my name is Brian Turbush, and I'm the Earthquake and Volcano Program Manager for Washington Emergency Management Division. And I would like to talk a little bit about just why we're here, why this is such an important thing to prepare for in Washington. And yes, some of these topics we're going to talk a little bit about are kind of scary to think about, and some of the videos and images might be as well. But we're sharing this to help you understand what those hazards are and how to prepare for them, because knowing is really important, knowing what is going to happen so that we know and we're fully prepared for it. So let's go ahead. Why do we have earthquakes? Why do we have tsunami threat? And why do we have volcanoes here? They're all related. It's because we are sitting here in Washington and we have the second highest earthquake risk in the United States. We have a higher risk than Alaska, even though they have a lot more earthquakes than us, because we have a lot more people and infrastructure near where the earthquakes are. California is above us because all the earthquakes happen in their extremely populated state. So, but when it comes to risk, we have a very high risk. And one way to think about that is back in 2001, the Nisqually earthquake, that was the most costly earthquake in the last 30 years. Cost us between $1 and $4 billion, 2001 money. So that's just one example of how risky these earthquakes are. Even though that wasn't a huge earthquake, it was very, very impactful to our state. And this is going to happen again someday. So why do we have these again? Because off our shore is a subduction zone, and that really governs why we have all of these earthquakes. So this is where the Juan de Fuca plate is pushing underneath the North American plate that we all live on. So we got this really solid plate here, not very dense rock, but then when the ocean comes under, it's very dense. It starts to slide underneath here. So it doesn't slide easily, though. It gets stuck. There's a lot of friction between these two rocks, a lot more than there is between your hands. So this is a good way to demonstrate what's happening. So as that happens, that friction builds up. But along that whole 700-mile Cascadia subduction zone, that friction could eventually release, and like it did in the year 1700. And when it does that, that release causes the floor to push up and can cause tsunamis. So we got a few different types of earthquakes we can have here. I'm going to look at all of those in more detail, but understand that this Cascadia subduction zone that runs parallel to our state along the coast, and all the pressure that's pushing on our state from that direction is what causes us to have all these different types of earthquakes potentially. And there's there's about an 84% chance that we will have a damaging earthquake here in the next 50 years. So it might not happen in the next 50 years, but there's not a very good chance of that. So let's look at these three different types in detail. The big one are deep earthquakes like Nisqually in the crustal faults like the Seattle and Tacoma fault or the Chelan fault that we have all over the state. So first, those deep earthquakes. So these happen deep underground in that plate that's subducting underneath. So kind of down here underneath us, 30, 50 miles deep usually. So as that plate goes underneath, it starts to bend and snap. So when it does that, you get an earthquake that just shoots up from the ground. It's very deep, so it's not necessarily as intense shaking, but these are still magnitude 6.5 to potentially 7.5 earthquakes. They're big earthquakes. It's just because they're deep, the shaking is not very intense on the surface. But again, in 2001, we had this Nisqually earthquake, magnitude 6.8, but shook from, say, like strong to severe shaking in a huge area of the Puget Sound. And again, $1 to $4 billion in damage, about 400 injuries. We were lucky nobody was killed in this earthquake. I think it was a timing thing more than anything. This is our most likely next type of damaging earthquake because these happen every 30 to 50 years. Shaking 30 to 50 seconds, relatively low intensity when compared to the other kinds we could have. There's not a direct tsunami threat from this type of earthquake, from our deep earthquakes, but they can cause tsunamis when they cause landslides into bodies of water like the Puget Sound. This happened in 1949 in the Tacoma Narrows from one of these deep earthquakes. So that's one. You can also get this liquefaction hazard that we see here in Tumwater from this type of earthquake. So our crustal fault earthquakes, or shallow earthquakes in some cases, these are big and very dangerous. For example, this would be the Seattle fault, which you can see a picture of here on the top through LiDAR images from our Department of Natural Resources. With the trees, it is really hard to see that there's a fault here, but this is the Seattle fault stretching across Bainbridge Island, and it goes all the way pretty much under I-90 all the way over to Bellevue area. This is a fault that could generate a magnitude 6.8 to 7.2 earthquake, and it would be very damaging on the surface because it's right there on the surface. It would shake very intensely. Think this more think of this as more similar to like the earthquakes that happened in Turkey a couple years ago, because they were right on the surface. Very strong shaking for maybe up to a minute. These are crustal faults, and we have these all over Washington. There's a lot of them across the Puget Sound, the Seattle Fault, the Tacoma Fault, Southern Whidbey Island Fault. But then there's also like the Chelan Fault that had a big earthquake in 1872. These are a whole Washington problem. It's not just a Western Washington thing. So something we need to prepare for. And it's very hard to tell when these are going to happen. There's not really a recurrence interval, but just know there's about a 15 to 25% chance these could happen in the next 50 years as well. And if they are crossing a body of water like the Puget Sound or like a big lake, these could also cause a tsunami. And then finally, the big one, the really big one, if you've read that article, the Cascadia subduction zone. This is our 700-mile long fault. And it's that whole surface of the fault could rupture all at once, all 700 miles from Northern California up to Northern Vancouver Island. And this would cause very intense shaking for all of Washington that's felt for 4 to 6 minutes. So very intense shaking. This would be a massive disaster, probably one of the worst natural hazards that could happen in the United States. We also have a 15 to 25% chance that this will happen in the next 50 years. We know our last earthquake on this subduction zone was back in the year 1700, actually on January 26th. They have tracked back when that happened and when a tsunami happened that hit Japan. So we know the exact date this last earthquake happened. We're in the window when this could happen, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen today, tomorrow, next week, or even in our lifetimes. But we think this is something that is very much worth preparing for, because it is going to be a huge disaster for everybody in Washington, Oregon, and California, and Canada. So huge amount of shaking. And this would almost definitely create a tsunami as well, which we're going to talk about. Dante will later. So really important, again, this is not to scare you. This is about what to expect during an earthquake. When the ground suddenly starts shaking, it's something that we normally rely on, being solid beneath our feet. And it can be very scary when this starts moving suddenly. So they strike suddenly. We cannot predict when an earthquake will occur. Everything will begin to shake during an earthquake. Lights will flicker and go out. You might have fire alarms. You might have sprinkler systems going off as a result. People are going to be scared. Windows might shatter, objects falling, flying off shelves. Again, for this subduction earthquake, we actually had an example of what that might look like. And there have been a lot of videos recorded of the magnitude 8.8 earthquake that happened in Kamchatka off Russia a couple of weeks ago at this point. So if you want a recent example of what this could look like, there's one in the news over the past couple of weeks. So yes, all sorts of damage is going to suddenly happen. Here's an example for anybody who hasn't seen one. This is happening in New Zealand. I will play this video twice. It's very short, but this is just how quickly the ground can start shaking. This is an example of a crustal earthquake in New Zealand. So one of those that's very close to the surface. So let's start that over one more time. Watch that building in the upper right. Very short amount of shaking, but a high amount of damage. And the people in this video are very accustomed to earthquakes at this point. They've had thousands of aftershocks when this video has happened from a larger earthquake, but starts shaking, and several seconds later, everything falls off of that building, all the bricks on the outside. So that's possible. That's how quickly it can go from nothing to high damage. So I'm going to move on. So earthquake shaking is one of the impacts, but it is not the only impact that we want you to be aware of and be prepared for. Some other things that can happen during this, you can see on the upper left, landslides are a possibility. When the ground shakes, especially when it's wet, especially during our wet seasons here in Washington, we can have landslides as a result, and they can dam up streams. They can cause a lot of extra trouble, block transportation routes. These are the things that we really need to prepare for as well. We have an example here in the upper right of ground liquefaction. So this is when wet ground starts to shake, it loses its ability to hold things above it. It almost turns into like a quicksand during the shaking. That doesn't last for very long afterwards, but this is something that in this area we have to make sure people build for. It's not a problem everywhere. We'll show you some resources on where you can find liquefaction hazard areas. Like if you're up on a high bedrock hill, you're not really going to experience this. But the shaking itself can cause a lot of things to fall over, especially bridges, especially our unreinforced masonry brick buildings that aren't designed to shake side to side. And then think about the hazardous material and fires that could potentially happen as a result, or other sorts of infrastructure damage when things shake that aren't intended to shake. Um, Fires can be a huge hazard afterwards when, say, gas lines or electric lines are disrupted by the shaking. And then I'm going to pass it on to Dante DeSabatino to talk about one of the other secondary hazards, which is tsunamis. Please go ahead, Dante.
Hi there. Yeah, my name is Dante DiSabatino. I work for Washington Emergency Management as a tsunami vertical evacuation structure project manager. As Brian mentioned in previous slides, we have a lot of different kinds of earthquakes that can cause risk in the Pacific Northwest here, and especially in Washington. I do want to highlight what potentially things could look like for the big one that we talk about from the Cascadia subduction zone. So in this clip here, in these pictures that you see, these are images of the Tohoku earthquake in 2011 in Japan, showing just what those impacts of the tsunami looks like, the rising high waters. And the video that's playing in the top left, this is showing that water coming in, bringing boats washing away buildings and things. You can see they happen quickly and suddenly. These are pretty big, stark images that we see. If we click on the next slide, I know that video is lagging just a little, so apologies for that. But if we do click, we will see what that before and after image can look like. So on the left-hand side, this is a Google Earth image off the coast of Japan before the tsunami, and then in the following days on the right-hand side. Tsunamis can be devastating, especially if they're near source tsunamis like from the Cascadia subduction zone. And it's important to know what those impacts might be and how we can protect ourselves. If we click one more time, this shows some statistics of just how impactful this tsunami was on Japan. It was a magnitude 9.1 in 2011. There was over 19,000 deaths, thousands of people injured and missing, and ultimately many, many people displaced. So why am I talking about the Japan 2011 earthquake and tsunami is because if we click on the next slide, we have that subduction zone lying off the coast of the Pacific Northwest as well. This is a simulation showing what that tsunami wave can look like. The areas of blue are 10 feet or lower. The areas in red that you see are waves that are 10 feet or higher. They happen relatively quick. If you look on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you can see what that time lapse looks like, showing the tsunami waves going through the Strait of Juan de Fuca into Puget Sound, and showing those rippling impacts on the coast as well. If folks are seeing some lag in the video, we do have these videos and others that are available on our website, mil.wa.gov/tsunami. And you can kind of see what those potential impacts can be. A lot of people don't realize that tsunamis aren't just one wave, and it's not necessarily that the first wave is the largest wave. There can be many subsequent waves that come in after, which is why it's really important if you do live near the coast or you're on the water to head inland and get to high ground. And we'll talk a little bit more about those protective actions in a bit, but this is just one simulation of many that shows how this earthquake might impact us in Washington State. You can see now we're over 4 hours after that start of the earthquake, and you can see that there's still those rippling waves going through. So while that simulation is playing on the background, we can click on the next slide just to show what the numbers of a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake may look like. So we recently did a casualty estimate study to show what those loss estimates might look like for a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake and tsunami. And from the tsunami alone, expecting for folks that only have maybe between 10, 15, or 20 minutes of time to get out of the inundation zone, we could expect within the first hour 50 to 65,000 casualties. That is a very humbling number and a large one. That's 29 to 30%, 37% of the population that's living in the tsunami inundation zone, with over 41,000 buildings potentially damaged and billions of dollars, 18 to 22 billion dollars, in building and content repair cost. This is a very scary number, but the most important thing to keep in mind is, aside from some of the protective actions that we can take, there's lots we can do from the outer coast for building tsunami vertical evacuation structures and mitigation, but this is why drills are so important. It's so important to practice drop, cover, hold on, and head to high ground, especially if you are living or working in the tsunami inundation zone near the water. Drills are important. The faster you can leave, the higher chance for survival. There's a reason there's a range there between 50 and 65,000, assuming, the longer departure times. So the longer you wait, the lower chance it is to get out of the tsunami inundation zone. Now, what I do want to mention briefly on this is mostly focused for our outer coast counties. It takes a little bit longer time for that wave from the big one to come in on the inner coast of Washington. But just wanted to make sure before we gone on to share how to stay safe, is that these can happen here. And even though Brian said it's between a 15 and 25% chance, it's really important to practice. So I'm going to pass it back on over to Brian. So let's learn how we can stay safe during earthquakes and tsunamis. And we'll go from there. So Brian, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. And I think Kadrina has these slides, so we're going to send it to her.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's Kadrina again. So let's talk about how to stay safe during an earthquake and tsunami. We've talked about hazards. Let's talk about how to stay safe. Next slide, please. So during an earthquake, items will fall. This includes you. So one of the most common injuries during an earthquake is falling because you may be trying to run or move while the ground is not stable. Another is being struck by falling or flying objects. The best way to protect yourself when the shaking starts is to drop, cover, and hold on. This is a well-researched recommendation and is the best action you can take in most situations. Next slide, please. So what does drop, cover, and hold on mean? Drop low, get close to the ground. You're less likely to fall and hurt yourself when you're close to the ground while the earth is shaking. Cover your neck, your spine, and head are important body parts that there may be falling objects. And hold on to that table or sturdy surface that is providing you cover, or hold on to that object that is steadying yourself. It's important to think about what drop, cover, and hold on means in different situations. There is volunteer footage and reports of school children who have drilled what to do at school. So when an earthquake hit at school, there was immediate application of what to do. But alternatively, those kids who did drill that, not knowing what to do at home around the dining table, and those precious seconds do matter. So practice that mental exercise of what should I do while I'm at home or in bed or outside or driving, or if I'm in a wheelchair or in a movie theater. For example, if you're in bed, stay in your bed, hold on, protect your head. If you're driving, put your hazards on, stay in your vehicle, get that cover. Next slide. So, what if you're in a tsunami zone? Earthquakes can be your first or maybe only warning that a tsunami is coming. After the shaking has stopped, grab your go bag and head for high ground. Use your evacuation route. There could be telephone poles or trees may be down or roads may be impassable. So make sure to find out if you're in a tsunami zone and if you need to evacuate. A really good example I've heard is that in football, you can't score a goal if you don't know you're on a football field. Employees, they may not know to evacuate to high ground if they don't know if they are in a tsunami zone. So please take that in consideration when practicing your drill. If you don't receive tsunami alerts, consider signing up. You can find info at mil.wa.gov/alerts. Next slide. So let's also talk about ShakeAlert. What is ShakeAlert? ShakeAlert is it's free. It's an earthquake early alerting system that can give you 10 or so seconds of warning to help protect yourself. The way ShakeAlert works, there is a dense network of seismic sensors and geodetic stations that continuously monitor ground motion across the West Coast. These sensors detect seismic waves, or P waves, which travel faster than the most damaging secondary waves, or S waves, that follow. Once a P wave is detected, the data is transmitted to processing centers and it's quickly analyzed to estimate the earthquake location, the magnitude, and extent of potential shaking, then sends an alert. This process happens faster than that S wave, that's that secondary wave that's coming, which is how we get those alerts. If you get an alert, it's not telling you, oh, there was an earthquake that happened worldwide. It's telling you there's an earthquake near you so that you can protect yourself. Next slide, please. So if you live in Washington or Oregon or California, it's that same system to receive these alerts. There are 3 ways to receive them. There is the wireless emergency alerts. Any phone that has the wireless emergency alert capability already has this built in. If you receive Amber alerts, this is the same system, just make sure that it's turned on. If you're an Android user, it's built into your phone as well. So short story, this should already be on your phone, but please check that it is. And if you'd like to download the My Shake app, you should be able to find this in your app store for your phone. Next slide, please. One of my favorite things to think about is ShakeAlert and application outside of phones. So there are many ways to implement ShakeAlert in the community. Use of PA systems in schools because students might not have access to their phones. Train systems utilizing such as the BART, where they will slow the passenger rail and freight trains. As that alert for an earthquake is coming. Buildings that utilize ShakeAlert can automate elevators returning to the closest floor to minimize trapped occupants. So getting those extra few seconds is incredibly impactful when it comes to safety. And it's fun to see how that can be used in different ways. If you'd like to see more use cases that can be applied to your city organization, check out shakealert.org. And if this is something that you're particularly interested in, especially for your workplace, feel free to contact Brian Turbish at brian.turbish@mil.wa.gov. Next slide. All right, so let's do a temperature check. With all this information that we went over so far, do you feel that your organization is prepared for an earthquake? You can do a simple thumbs up or thumbs down as a react, or you can choose to answer this question quietly to yourself in the privacy of your own cubicle or office or home if you work from home. Oh, awesome. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up. And then for those who are raising their hands, feel free to input your questions in the Q&A. Next slide, please. So, preparedness. This is just to politely remind people that preparedness is a continuous journey. For those on the call prepared, for the apocalypse, make sure to rotate and restock your supplies for those who are just starting out. And chunk it out. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. This is something that you can build over time. For employees, you can start with alerts. Are they getting alerts? Do they know that they're in a tsunami inundation zone? Do they know where the evacuation routes are? Do they have an emergency plan? Does your company have an emergency plan? Is there a plan for how employees will communicate or reunify with their families? And are people aware about preparedness and go bags? Preparedness is never done. So this is a continuous cycle. So that revisiting, that drilling, that making sure information is up to date, people will leave, new people will come in. This is a continuous journey. Next slide, please. How to hold a drill at work. This can range from simple to mid-range or full scale. Let's get to the next slide. And this is a reminder, practicing drills are important. They save lives. It's one thing to know what to do. It's another to have that muscle memory. So if your panic, jumbled brain kicks in, maybe you've already had that drill already in place, so your body knows what to do. This picture on the left is a CCTV footage of people getting that alert, then showing another person of getting that alert, but neither of them drop cover or holding on. Drilling what to do can help you in an emergency. So get familiar with it. Have an awareness of what you should do. Something to also revisit is identifying safety hazards like structural or non-structural. We can go to the next slide. So let's narrow down what having a drill in the workplace means. Deciding on what you want to test, how many people will practice in this drill, how often will this drill happen, how much time and resources do you have to plan and execute the drill. This can be chunked out. It can be simple so that you can be familiar, if you're familiar with practicing this in school, to something as very full scale in the workplace. You don't need to overthink this. If K through 12 children can do this, you can do it too. Next slide, please. So what does simple to full scale mean? Simple, low resources, low commitment, easy to plan and execute. Versus going towards more full scale, that's higher, more resource commitment, but it also can increase your preparedness, and people may walk away feeling more informed of what to do in the workplace. Next slide, please. So simple. What is a simple drill in the workplace? That basic earthquake safety drill is having that drop, cover, and hold on, and having a tsunami evacuation. If you're in the inundation zone. So set a time. October 16th at 10:16 a.m. is a really good time. You could have this during new employee orientation. You can integrate this with your fire safety drill. Just have a designated time, let people be aware, and then having a blurb on that education element of why earthquake safety is important. You could announce this as a drill through a PA system. You could have an internal messaging system. You could have a calendar invite, and then either walking or just talking through the tsunami evacuation route. An optional thing, while this is top of mind during your simple drill, is identifying potential hazards in the work area and discussing how to fix them, or if it's something that's very easy and you could fix them now. Next slide. Yes, mid-range. So mid-range, it's that still drop, cover, and hold on, and that tsunami evacuation piece, as well as some additional steps. You can discuss having a communication plan. You can do a hazard hunt or a tabletop exercise, or you can test how would employees reunite with their families. You can do a safety training as well, review earthquake procedures, establish roles and responsibilities so people know who to go to during an evacuation or during or after the earthquake drill. I think the next slide goes over hazard hunt. Risk reduction, yes. So what is a hazard? Hazard hunt is basically, okay, let's see what could be a tripping hazard, what could be a fire hazard, what is an object that's high up, that's heavy, that could fall down on you. Just securing those objects so that they're less dangerous. Shelves, glasses, picture frames. This is to minimize injury and that financial hardship after a quake. Now, what do I mean by tabletop exercise? For those of you who play board games, this is very simple. It doesn't have to be scary. You can gamify this. So for tabletop exercise, that's a discussion-based exercise. You can determine a scenario. For instance, it's 1 p.m. on a workday. Hundreds of employees are on site. Some of them might be at lunch. A magnitude 6.8 earthquake occurs. The shaking lasts for 48 seconds. 3 buildings have structural damage, as well as some of the roads leading to them, or cell phone service is flooded or unreliable. So you can invite people to bring into what their current plans are. You make sure to ensure that the right people are present to have impactful discussions on a tabletop exercise. And you don't punish yourself for not knowing the answer. This is the reason why we have exercises, so that we know what's missing. And you can add optional injects, like your supplier is unavailable, or there's an aftershock, or there's a power outage. Next slide, please. And then let's see. Oh, yes, and full-scale exercise. So full-scale exercise is everything that we talked about, and adding more possibilities, such as what is the plan for work after the earthquake? You can simulate communication blackouts. You can address how would we continue business after uh, after an earthquake or a tsunami. You can also bring people into the conversation, such as partners, such as your supply chains. You can have an after action report meeting on how to address and fix these issues, what your next steps are, and really fully integrating of what to do during an earthquake and tsunami drill. And then let's see, I believe I can hand this off to Tristan. I wasn't able to check if Tristan is on the call at this moment.
I'm here.
Awesome, thank you. I would like to introduce Tristan Allen to talk about business continuity.
Right. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me. I actually think that this module might pair well maybe with exercises in mind, because a good idea before we exercise or drill anything is to have a plan. And to talk about business continuity planning, there's really a pretty wide range of complexities when it comes to business continuity planning. If you're talking about large corporations, they have entire divisions of folks who went to school in business continuity planning and work to keep them afloat. When you get into more small and medium-sized business communities, we find that it is a rarity to find much of a plan in place. Washington is home to 672,000 small businesses, and it employs 1.4 million of our residents here in Washington, which is, a pretty sizable percentage of the employees. I think it's about 48% of employees in Washington. We can jump to the next slide. So when considering business continuity planning, it's good to consider it next to insurance and recognize that these are complementing things, and that you don't want to rely on just one or the other. Reviewing your insurance policy and the hazards that are covered under your policy is always a good idea, notably that earthquakes are not covered by every plan, nor is a fire. So looking at which hazards, and then looking at the total amount of money that you have involved in your policy, and will that cover all of your assets and your operations. Jump to the next slide. So, insurance gives you that financial protection. It may replace lost assets. It may, depending on your policy, give you payroll coverage for your staff. When we're thinking about hazards like a large subduction zone earthquake, it goes beyond just ensuring everybody's okay and your storefront gets back up and running, but also you have to start thinking into how are folks going to be coming in to keep your business afloat. If you're a retail business, for instance, you're going to want to be open almost immediately to resume that revenue stream. There's various statistics about business failures following a disaster. FEMA says 40% of businesses that experience a closure due to a disaster do not reopen, and an additional 25% fail within a year. SBA is a little bit more scary. Small Business Administration indicate that close to 90% of small businesses fail within 2 years of being struck by a disaster. So the odds are generally not in favor of small business communities that experience disruption related to a disaster. Business continuity planning doesn't have to be a large, complex, monumental undertaking. If you're a small organization that has limited footprint, it can be as easy as gathering employees informally one morning over coffee and discussing the different aspects of your business, including knowing your risks, which you just got a great rundown of the geologic risks that you face in this region. So thinking about those risks, knowing your operations, what is it that is required to keep you afloat, whether it's your storefront or equipment or suppliers, etc. Knowing your employees, where they live, how far they have to get to come into work. Knowing your key customers and kind of mapping out where they are and how they would operate following a disaster. And then knowing your finances, knowing how much of a cushion you might have. That's where you start documenting your insurance policies and kind of just documenting it all and thinking it through for what it would look like should you be forced to close due to a natural disaster. There's a great, and I'll leave you with the next slide, a great simple toolkit for dipping your toes into the water of business continuity planning. From the Institute of Business and Home Safety. It's called, and you see here, OFB Easy, Open for Business Easy. And it provides you just simple templates that you can start filling out that, again, follow those categories of risks, operations, employees, equipment, disruptions, key customers, finances. And I encourage you all to take a look at it. Again, you can start with a very simple run through and graduate to more complex planning and ultimately exercising. I think additionally on the ShakeOut website, there's a great ShakeOut drill manual for businesses, and it gives you different levels of participation, one being the simple drop, cover, hold on drill. Graduating to life safety, maybe you do a fire evacuation drill on top of it. Graduating into a tabletop decision-making drill, and then ultimately level 4 would be an advanced business operations simulation drill, and it kind of unpacks those terms for you. So at a high level, that's really what we're hoping folks can think about when it comes to business continuity planning. I'm happy to answer any questions or share additional resources as requested.
Thank you, Tristan. All right, so additional resources. I have so many resources for people. Next slide, please. So if you're like me and you like steps, Earthquake Country has a really good 7 steps of earthquake safety to familiarize yourself with on the preparedness, survive and recover, and then reconnect and restore. Next slide. So also a consideration is structural retrofits. So identify if your building has seismic risk and requires retrofitting. This is pretty common with older buildings, unreinforced masonry or soft story buildings, securing your buildings to their foundations. Get an evaluation from a subject matter expert on this, like a geotechnical engineer or seismic retrofit contractor. If you want some drill resources, we have that. I can point you toward business, earthquake, tsunami. And again, these slides will all be available so that you'll have all of these links. Our next slide, please. We also have educational preparedness resources slide. If you like to read up, we have our general preparedness. We have some quick videos. We also have a more deep dive for tsunami and earthquake, especially for homeowners. I know this is workplace centric, but if you want a homeowner's guide, that is also available. Next slide. And we also have alert resources. If you want to make sure that you have alerts available to you on your phone or email, these are the places to look up to sign up. I also want to point to the Geologic Information Portal. I really like this website, the dnr.wa.gov/geology portal. You can put your address. I've put my own home address in this to see what are the hazards that I should be aware of in my area. You can check your workplace, home, your work route. These are just good to know if, like, say, do I have to worry about liquefaction? Do I have to worry about landslides? This is a good place to check what those hazards are. Brian, did you want to talk about intensity versus magnitude real quick?
Sure. So one other resource here as you're planning for earthquakes is understanding what intensity of shaking you want to think about. So earthquakes have one magnitude, but many intensities. And the idea is this would be a Cascadia subduction zone magnitude 9 earthquake, but how much shaking people feel from that really depends where they are, how far away they are from the shaking, what sort of soil they're on, what sort of building they're in. That's going to vary. So if you understand that you're in an area where one of the faults might be, you can start to look at these scenarios. And these seismic scenarios are also available on that DNR geology portal that was just on the last page. We can make sure you have the link for that as well. But look at these scenarios, understand what level of shaking to expect in these different seismic scenarios so you can make sure that you understand what you're preparing for, because that's the idea here. Know your hazards, know what to prepare for. And yeah, for example, this is all based on the modified Mercalli intensity scale, which is based on the strength of the ground shaking. But these are all things, so we can say it's like 0.2 PGV percent gravitational acceleration. But that actually, what that means is like how many people feel it, what your experience is at any of these levels. So these colors all coordinate to those shake map colors, and this is a USGS product that you can use to help understand what you might expect, what sort of damage, and what you might feel as somebody in the area. So really good planning tool to have these available for your area.
And thank you, everyone. Just before we leave, I know Holly Stark has been monitoring our questions. Is there any that you would like to spotlight?
Hi, I'm Holly Stark. I'm the Outreach Program Manager here at YEMD. I do have a couple that I wanted to highlight that pertain mostly to ShakeOut and some of the earthquake safety. There were a lot of really good questions about tsunami, which is understandable. It's been top of mind since the Russia earthquake and the tsunami. There's a lot of great resources, and I'm invite you to contact us again to talk more about the tsunami risk. But let's dive into, since we're talking about shakeout and drop cover hold, here's some that I thought were worth repeating, especially this one. It says, looking at how devastating buildings can be after earthquakes, how can a table be safe if it too will not hold up? Brian, how can a table be safe?
So that's a fantastic question. Yeah. So a little bit on our building codes here in Washington, you see images of buildings collapsing all over the world. Now in Washington, our buildings are designed not to collapse during an earthquake. They're built to an understandable seismic standard. So collapse is not a likely scenario, even in these very strong earthquakes. It is a possibility though. So when we say drop, cover, hold on, we're trying to make sure people are protected from the most common types of injuries that happen: falling or flying objects, and you falling down during the shaking. So if you are under something sturdy, again, even if there are things falling from above, especially if you're near the leg of that table right there, that is designed, you can jump up and down on that, you can throw heavy things on that, and it is not going to crack and collapse on you. The idea is even in the event of something very dangerous happening, like the floors above you coming down, you're in a much better position than you would be with no cover if you're under that. So in the majority of situations, it is most likely that your building will not collapse. But even if it does, it is better to be under something than not under something or running around while the ground is shaking. Because can you imagine trying to be on stairs while the ground is shaking? Or leaving a building, as you might have seen in that one video we played of the shaking. If you're exiting a building while it's shaking, you've seen how quickly that ground that those walls can peel off, and you put yourself in the most dangerous place. So statistically, you are much safer staying close to where you are, getting low to the ground, covering your head and neck, and taking cover under something sturdy during earthquake shaking. Even if it doesn't feel like that's the right thing to do, please understand that this is the best recommendation we can give. So I hope that helps. Got to clarify too, sturdy table. This is not your glass coffee table. That is not a good thing to be under. So think about that now and think about that as you're planning for your drill, how you can be the most safe you can possibly be in your area. And if there's anything you can do now to make that area safer. Very good question.
Okay, I'll highlight maybe one or two more. I would really like this one because it's clarifying some of the capabilities of the Shake Alert earthquake early warning system, what it can and can't do and what its potential is. So it says, are you saying that facilities can automate functions on the receipt of a Shake Alert notification?
This is Brian again. I would be happy to mention that. Yes, you can automate actions using the Shake Alert earthquake early warning system. As Katrina mentioned before, there are some schools that use this in their PA systems. The Bay Area Rapid Transit in California slows down its trains using the system already. And we have some water and wastewater systems in Washington that are already using this to stop pumps so they don't catch on fire and close water valves so that the water won't escape. And we'll have that for drinking water and for firefighting if we need that after an earthquake. So there are some applications. If you're interested in learning more about those, I can put my email in the chat, but our suggestion is please reach out because we need this in a lot more things in order for it to work. It is a really amazing tool, but we need it installed in a lot more areas.
Here's a really good one from Charlotte Green. It says, are there any actions that you want to target for communities? We have an over 55 community and will be participating in the drill. Yay, thank you. We normally place fire extinguishers in the driveway, identify where and how to turn off the gas, and alerting folks to if you are okay or need help. Are there any other actions you would recommend we practice? I could actually take a stab at this as the outreach program manager, Charlotte. One thing I would reiterate from this webinar and for everybody on there is, as a community, to find out where the best local alerts are to sign up for, and to take a moment to really understand the Shake Alert earthquake early warning are two really great things that you can do as a neighborhood. So you're getting those alerts as early as possible to take protective actions and to know what to do during disasters.
Okay, so we have, we're wrapping up this meeting. For more questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at public.education@mil.wa.gov. That's on the screen. And thank you to our speakers for speaking at this event, as well as our ASL interpreter. Don't forget to register for ShakeOut at shakeout.org/register. If you enjoyed this webinar, registration participation is how we can continue having conversations of having webinars widely available. So those numbers do inform decisions and outreach as well. And I hope all of you are more empowered to practice earthquake and tsunami drills. Thank you, everyone. And that ends our webinar.